Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Fractional CAO. I'm Mark Baczynski. So, in this episode, I want to drill down a little bit on the term business value. Business value. You think about that term, we all hear it almost day in and day out at the workplace. And it's one of those words, unfortunately, it's a little bit like robust or a sort of say nothing word in the worst case. Like people throw around the word robust, like what the hell does that mean? And I fear that the term business value has gotten to the same place where people either just sort of shine it on as a say nothing term, or perhaps they have a definition in their mind that they don't necessarily articulate. They just use the term and they expect everybody to have the same, sort of the same understanding. From my point of view, as a fractional CAO, I have a pretty concise definition, and that is a material impact on the financials of a business, a material impact on the financials of a business. And, I stand by that, and I think that's possible in the way we run our analytics practices. But again, that's not necessarily shared by people, right? So I'm thinking, how about the people on the front line? You think developers, engineers, whatever you want to call them, that are writing the SQL, they're building the tables, they're dragging and dropping through all the tools that are out there. What do they think about business value? And it's it's a hard concept to if you really pause and think about it, it's a hard concept to to sort of forecast. So I did the next best thing to interviewing a bunch of developers. I went to the place where I believe a lot of developers are taught, right? So you think about agile development, that's a pretty common thing. A lot of people do that in terms of development process. And behind Agile, there's usually Scrum and Scrum meetings and Scrum masters and all that kind of stuff. So there's actually a company, scruminc.com, that actually anoints the Scrum masters. So, those that are in the Agile meetings doing the work day in and day out, what are they taught by Scrum Inc? Well, it turns out if you go to scruminc.com, one of the pages on the website is about their view of business value. Like, what is business value from the point of view of those teaching those on the Agile Scrum team? And I'm just going to read this because I found it to be fascinating, right? So scruminc.com says, quote, there are a number of ways that project managers can estimate business value involving different trade-offs between speed and quantitative rigor. It's up to the project manager to decide which method is best suited for any given situation. Common methods include, number one, the bubble sort. Bubble sorting is a simple algorithm that allows you to sort elements in a list by comparing adjacent elements and swapping them if you're in the wrong order. The bubbling algorithm sorts based on the comparison, based on the name of the thing bubble. The bubble implies that the top stuff kind of bubbles up to the top, like duh. Or alternative two, planning poker, also called scrum poker, is a gamified technique that development teams use with physical cards as they attempt to estimate what it will take to get the job done, and then solicit the group's input and ultimately consensus, making them more engaged and more accurate than other methods. It goes on to talk about break-even analysis, net present value, very much project oriented, right? Is the work I'm doing right now the right task, the right project? Does it have anything to do with material impact on the financials of the business? No, right? So I would say, rubbish. We're not going to go there, right? So the way I think about this is, as I suggest, something much more attuned to the business itself. So let's work through an example, right? So I'm a chief analytics officer. You've hired me as a fractional CAO. Sales is an obvious place where people want to go, right? So more sales, faster, better, faster, bigger, sales. And that's obviously a major dial. If we can turn up sales for a company, there's no question that has a material impact on the business, right? So far, so good. But in my experience, and it's largely, to be fair, my personal experience has been around B2B, so businesses selling to other businesses as opposed to Procter & Gamble soap on the shelf at Target. That has its own world, obviously, in terms of analytics, market basket, and all that. But my experience relative to B2B sales is there's usually salespeople. They're organized into some kind of sales organization. There's a VP of sales that's operating the affair, and Unfortunately, I've had way too much experience where the process that those salespeople go through is a little bit crude, right? It starts with lead generation. We got to go find new customer prospects. And then there's a whole bunch of magic in the middle that's done by quality salespeople. And then ultimately those that are good closers is the term. They close the order and, we've got ourselves a sale. So we then parse the universe based on those that are good closers and not so good at closers. We end up with high performers on our sales teams and some not so high performers. And we give big bonuses to the good performers. We fire the bad performances and we start the process all over again, right? So I look at this and say, wow, what a beautiful opportunity to apply analytics in an analytics practice, right? So can we tear down a sales cycle and make it much richer? It's not something that just starts with a lead and ends with a close, but how about all the conversations that have to happen in the middle with the prospect that's in your business? So some of you are thinking, well, doesn't Salesforce.com do this? Well, kind of. They have steps in the sales process where they would say, well, you have to make sure you identify the decision maker and you have to make sure you've discovered that they have a budget, and some of these basic things. So, booyah, those are important. But think about your business, right, in terms of the nuance and the quality of the conversations that have to have as part of the sales process, right? And if we could get that formalized and documented, number one. Number two, we train salespeople as we hire them to follow that process. But here's the beautiful part. We instrument that process, right? So we start figuring out as we move from stage 1 through gate A to stage 2 through gate B through stage 3 through the process where individual salespeople have themselves constipated in the pipe, if you will, where they're stuck, and what's in common with the people that are stuck to the people that seem to be ripping through this, right? So it's not just go find me good closers or go find me in the recruiting sense. Why? I need somebody that was in Quota Club at their last job for 3 years in a row. Surely they will do a good job for us. Very dangerous assumption, as it turns out, because your business, by definition, is unique. The issue is, how do we define the steps and stages that are for your business that are best practices, essentially, that get documented and repeated and then instrumented? So how do we profile our salespeople that we're going to hire to make sure we hire the right people, not necessarily the Quota Club winner from the last job? How do we make sure that the speed of getting through the stages and the gates is as brisk as possible? And if we find that one particular gate is more troublesome than another for a particular population of our customer base or of our sales base, why is that? Do they have different pricing assumptions? Do they have a different product mix that they're selling? Are they targeting different prospects based on some profile that's different? So you can see the drill here. Analytics, analytics, analytics. And I would say a CAO or somebody that looks like a CAO in terms of an analytic point of view can work directly with a sales organization, VP of sales right on down through, to make sure that this stuff's optimized. Now, there you go. This is not bubble up. This is not Scrum and project NPV and all that. This is material impact in a business. Now, this leaves me with the sort of reality of where are a lot of customers today, where are a lot of companies today when it comes to their investment in analytics and something like a chief analytics officer. In too many cases, they don't have one. So enter the CIO. Batman with the cape, the hero comes in and says, well, this analytics, this is kind of computer stuff, Ms. or Mr. CIO. You surely can have some impact on this. Can you figure out a way to increase our sales? And the CIO is like, well, first of all, I'm kind of busy, right? I'm worried about security of my website. I'm worried about keeping the bloody email up and running. I'm worried about all kinds of phishing and other security things. I'm worried about compliance, regulatory compliance. I got a lot going on. I'm kind of busy. So yeah, I can kind of attack an analytics practice. I can hire some mid-level analysts, perhaps. I can hire some people and invest in something like Snowflake as an example, where I can load some data. But at the end of the day, I, as this CIO, probably don't have a lot of personal experience running a sales organization, right? So how is it fair to ask me as the CIO, just because this is like computer stuff, I should be able to sit down with a VP of sales and truly instrument a bespoke system that has teeth to it? I think it's asking a lot. Now, that's not to say it's impossible, but you're asking a lot of the CIO because that's their job on Monday, and on Tuesday, you're expecting them to be a security expert on some other part of the business. Very, very difficult. So I want to go through this a bit deeper, I want to bring on my guest for this week. He is a CIO, a damn good one in his own right. He runs a practice called IT Results. And essentially, he's a fractional CIO working across industries for many, many years here. His name's Jeff Weiss. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
All right, man. So I don't know if you were sipping on your coffee or petting your dog or what when I was going through that little rant. Did you have a chance to listen to that?
I did. I was mostly just shaking my head, so up and down, up and down, not sideways, but up and down.
Okay, so you as a CIO, I guess it's fair to say I should start with. I think you're a bit unique as a fractional CEO in the sense that you value business outcomes as very much part and parcel to the way that you represent yourself and the business, right? You're not there just to flip bits around. You're there to help have some impact, right? So I have that right?
You do, and typically the better way to define that is why I get hired. Typically, I get hired, Mark, by a CEO or somebody on the board or executive who's trying to add or trying to recognize more value from their IT investments. And so what I bring to the table is unique that people have enjoyed is the business acumen, understand the business side of IT in order to apply IT to the business. So as you described, the CIO and all the multiple facets and activities they're involved in, all that's true. We do those as well. But what's not common is that bridge between the business and IT. And so that's what I've always found to be my unique offering. And it's really built through taking time to understand the business itself, not just the IT technology side, but understand the business itself, which gets back to your initial question, how you define business value. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But that's what's unique about my offering is we focus a lot on the business side and build IT to support that business.
Yeah, very good. So we kind of violently agree in that sense, right? I have a sense of an analytics leader needs to have business acumen and impact business outcomes. You're looking at the same kind of opportunity from the point of view of a CIO. But I suspect I don't want to pretend I understand your business, right? You tell me. But I suspect for you to apply IT more generically to business outcomes is more challenging than analytics, right? If I can turn a knob for sales, everybody gets that, right? As I just went through in my brief remarks, how do you take something like governance and security and the stuff that's so important that you have to deal with? How do you translate that into business value? How do you do it?
Well, there's some things in the business world that are necessary, I don't call it evils, but the things we have to do to keep the lights on through IT. And so you don't always have to quantify or qualify those activities. For example, governance, external reporting from the government and so forth. Security is obvious for everybody now. So you don't have to really spend a lot of time selling those things that everyone recognizes as being necessary to keep the lights on. And so you do allocate a broad sense of resources towards those, and you make sure that keeps on going.
Yeah.
But what the executives want is beyond that. They expect that. They expect the lights to be on. They expect you to keep things secure. They expect you to have current technology. And it's the things that happen beyond that you want to add value through IT. And one of my philosophies is what gets measured gets done. And I try to keep things as simple as I can. And so when you think about what gets measured gets done, it very much correlates to what you've been talking about, but it does help you provide some focus in how you're going to align your IT resources to the business. And so that's kind of how I approach that as far as balancing those things that have to get done versus those things that might be the value add.
Yeah. And I don't know if you resonate with this, but I find it almost to be a distinction between what a board will want, and there's so much risk mitigation that comes from a board, right? Keep us from getting sued is sort of the bottom line, and that of course has to do with breach of data. Data gets out, or people, your customers' social security numbers are out, or all of your nightmare scenarios. Whereas your executives are more aligned with operational excellence, right? So they take for granted, what did you call it? Keep the lights on. And so I suspect what you're saying is as you engage with execs, right, they have this haunting ghost that says, don't screw it up. Make sure we are secure. Make sure we are buttoned up. make sure the lights are on, but then let's get to the business value. So then I guess the question would be, do you have a difficult time or an easy time learning the business when you sign on to do a new gig? Because I in my CAO practice, it's not like day one, right? And it's probably on the order of, I would say, 4 weeks to sort of figure out where the bathroom is, and then maybe 8 weeks to really kind of start to figure it out. Does that, how do you deal with learning the business part of it?
Well, I think it might help for me to answer that question by describing to you my client base. I'm not niche oriented. In fact, I have clients from utilities to manufacturing to retail to Intel. I've had a very wide broad of clients. And so to your point, learning their business is challenging. I have a process I use to incorporate the end users in that discovery. And so that's just a process I use to make sure I have the right people at the table.
Oh, yeah.
And so sometimes when a contract CIO like myself gets involved, the people hiring you, maybe it's a executive team, they may have some key managers they want to be involved and help you do discovery. But I always insist on having some very key end users involved, people getting a job.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And so that helps me really get a much better feel of the true business issues. And then you probably know, Mark, most of the time, those people they know what needs to be done. I mean, they understand what needs to be done very, very clearly. They just don't have the tools to do it. And so that helps me align the IT to the business in that regard, in that we help then supply the tools to those end users and key business decision makers to help them get their job done.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the outside in thinking, we both share the fractional model here.
Yeah.
It's harder in the sense that you've got to learn the business, but at some level it's easier because you can just talk about truth in a bottle, right? You just declare things for what they are. And I find, if you're talking to CFO, CEO, execs, and then you're talking to field personnel that are closer to the customer, you don't get exactly the same story. Sometimes you get quite a bit different story, right? So to be able to pull those worlds together and facilitate some outcome that then you essentially implement through the systems, the information systems that that's sort of where the rubber meets the road. But it's this business acumen and pulling together the right people. So you're a bit more formal about it. Sounds like you got a process. I don't have a process. I just have big ears and I put them in front of as many people as I can.
Well, keep in mind that when I get hired, it's really with some particular issue in mind. They don't just hire an outsourced person, particularly at this level, to, hey, we have some money to spend, come on in and join us. There's usually a very, very specific issue they want resolved. And so that helps lead you towards what would be the most important business areas to discover. So just the hiring process itself and understand what the needs are by why they're hiring you is really one of the things that drives that initial process.
Yeah.
But I give an example of how that works. I had a client recently, a global client, who when I first got engaged with them, I was really engaged to help them with a new enterprise solution, a new ERP solution that we need to first identify and then implement. In that process, we identified over 20 end-of-life systems were in place in that environment. So 20 different systems were about to die. And so, we had to shift our priorities, and by systems, it could be a router system or it could be software, but a system being hardware or software related, both under the IT umbrella, 20 different instances where we were going to have trouble. But those were unseen because people are focused on so many other things. So sometimes you may come in initially with one thing in mind, and then as you part of discovery, as I'm sure you have had seen as well, your direction changes a little bit. But that's what kind of creates a roadmap for you as far as what the priorities are. Sometimes your priorities get changed.
Yeah, so. You follow your nose to where the biggest impact can be. That's sort of what you're implying. Yeah. So let's go back to the concept that I was again just sort of entertaining in my opening remarks. This idea that analytics and analytics leadership is a bit specialized. It's not to be peanut buttered in with other stuff. And as fractional CIO, I mean, that's about as wide a net as you can get, right? I can only imagine
Yes.
customers say, well, that means this to me. You need to mow my lawn. You need to you need to cook me a tuna fish sandwich. I mean, who knows what the requests are? But I guess my line of questioning now, Jeff, is, my thesis is that analytics as a specialty, it's called a competency, skill set, experience base. When it comes your way, one, you've got a lot of balancing to do, and two, you can't just pull from rich history where you've uniquely done that, right? You're pulling from history where you've kind of partially done that. So do you ever get asked to do analytics work? And if and when you do, how do you deal with it?
It's not very often for analytics work because, again, usually we're there for a different problem, right? And so the analytics, it's more of a pyramid for me, Mark. When I get involved in a company, there's some foundational issues I get involved in, and it can be security, it can be a new ERP system required, it can be a CIO is leaving, and I'm the bridge for 6-7 months to find my replacements. But there's a bigger strategic issue that I'm trying to address first. And I think this is very common, even without a contract CIO. The same for a hired CIO. You're normally, trying to focus on those strategic initiatives. That's where you want to be. Yeah. You want to be in the strategic initiatives, but all the other things pull you back down.
The real life stuff. Like you talk about 20 systems that have to be dealt with, that kind of thing.
Yes. But back to your point about analytics, though, what's key about how that pyramid of foundational things, you can think of like Maslow's pyramid, but not those topics, but the same idea, that there's some foundational things in place first. And that directly relates to your business. And that is, you have to have very solid business processes in place and therefore collecting data properly, timely, and accurately. And that's the foundation of the business. And if you're not doing that properly, no one's going to be asking you about CAO type of activities. No one's going to be asking about analytics because they're trying to fix the engine.
Yeah.
And so it really depends on the client and where they are in the life cycle of what I would call the IT health. If they're very, 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 very well established, things are in place, and they're just really now trying to accelerate their profitability through IT rather than IT be the brake. You've been around companies, usually IT is a barrier sometimes.
Well, it's like a cost center in the worst case, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I try to make IT be the accelerator, and how to get about that is by focusing on the foundational things first, because if you don't fix those things first, no one's going to have time to listen to you about your topic. So to answer your question, how do I get involved in those areas? It's only after we've had successes doing other things. It's only after things are stable, after things are in place that people feel there's more value add there, information is flowing, we're more responsive to the company, we're able to turn around new products quicker, all those things you're trying to do in a business that sometimes IT can hold you back from. Once you get to that point, it's only then have I found that people start thinking about, okay, now we have a strong foundation. How is it we then can truly add value? And how about what's going on in our data that we don't know? Yeah. What's those relationships of things that we don't even see yet? That your approach would help with. But you can't get there without having a foundation in place first. So it really depends on your client in terms of where they are in their IT health. And that's how I would answer that question.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and you got me thinking now. I mean, certainly analytics relies in all the gigs that we're involved with, and I think it's just a best practice in the industry. You don't want a concept where you're hacking and whacking your way through to just try to find some answer for some business problem, right? There is an architecture that has to stay the test of time. The data has to be trustworthy. The data has to be of sufficient minimum quality, not perfect, but some minimum quality that we can trust it. It has to be scalable, right? So some companies are very accretive. There's a lot of M&A going on. So you buy another company. How is our infrastructure going to deal with that? So it's almost like I don't know how you would resonate with this, but I almost think of it as a continuum, right? So on the one end, think of like on the left side of a line, there's a dot called pure IT stuff, pure infrastructure. kind of stuff. And as we start to come across the line with more towards the middle, we're teasing out our data needs. So data really, it's the transactions that we have. We sell things, we ship things, we make things, right? Those transactional elements become pieces of data. And so if you're looking at it from that kind of left side of the continuum, the CIO side of the continuum, you're seeing it very much as we got to get the infrastructure right? But if you continue through that continuum to the other side, right, like there's a dot way over on the right now where the analytics officer lives, which is, look, I trust the infrastructure's there. It's magic as far as I'm concerned. I'm trying to deal with the implications of the data. I'm trying to have measurable impact, effect on the business. And so all the stuff you're doing over there with the data, that's details, right? It's in Snowflake and it's well documented and it's backed up and whatever the stuff is, right?
Sure.
I almost wonder if a way to put that middle dot, the data infrastructure guy, that's sort of classic chief data officer stuff, right? You could maybe think of it like that. Data engineering, kind of lives there. And depending on which way you're seeing that middle, if you're seeing it from your side, you're seeing it as a pyramid, I think you described. It's a nice metaphor, right? So you're building on, a stable base to the next layer to the next layer. Right. I'm over here going, come on, guys, can you get this thing fixed so I can get on with, with actually using the data?
Yeah. And then go back to your earlier point about the whole idea of outsourcing anyway. So what you just described is that challenge of fixing and working on a pyramid while you are maybe pulling the CIO and the IT resources to try to solve problems. And yet you have hiring, firing going on. You have compliance, as you mentioned, you have security going on. So it really leads to and really supports your model of having somebody outsource as a fractional person to focus on these things. It's no different than anything else we outsource. It's usually because we don't have the skills on staff to do it, and we want somebody to come in who can do and just focus on that. So problems we describe in trying to create value, business value through IT, very much feed towards the model you're describing.
Yeah,
that's my model. I'm an outsourced CIO, and so my model has been successful due to that fact. I come in, I focus, and I'm not involved in all the other things as an employee. And it's a wonderful place to live because I can just get things done.
Yeah, right. Well, that's a whole other world that people that work have real jobs don't get, right? There's a lot of meetings, a lot of overhead that are fractional resources. I mean, I think that's part of the beauty of what you're hiring. I like to promise results within 6 months. Something good's going to happen within 6 months. Let's define what it is. We're not here to stir a peas around our plate and just contemplate our navels for the next couple of years.
Right.
And that's very much an outside-in, I think, approach that you you share. So let me before we run out of time here, I did want to ask you. All you got to do is go to any pop culture website or turn on the television, and you're going to hear the word AI in some context just thrown at you, right? So on the one hand, it's particularly in the investor community, if you go to like Yahoo or Barron's or something like that, right? They're talking about NVIDIA and Microsoft, the companies, Google, the companies that are invested in AI because they're going to take over the world. But if you back off that and you just say, okay, hang on, slow down. What is AI for the common person and for you and I as people that have to come to the table with good advice for our clients, because they ask the question, so this AI thing's all the rage. How do we get some of that AI stuff here? How do you deal with this whole subject with your clients?
Well, it actually came up recently at a client. It's an accounting firm, and how these things come up, like any other new wave concept and under IT umbrella. An executive goes to a conference. They had a presentation at the conference by a presenter. They come back home to the business. Oh, look, Joe down the street's doing X, Y, Z. We got to be doing that too. Or how come we're not doing this? And of course, it's the same executive who gave a list of things to get done last week, right? And so the first thing about AI, how I look at it is, which is very pertinent to this conversation, is AI. It's about data. I mean, what is AI? It's all about data. There's nothing else. Its livelihood, its brain, its entire system is about data. It doesn't live without data, right? So it feeds to your point of how important data is and so forth. And so, although I don't see it, I mean, we hear more about it. Yes, we do. But when I'm working with companies who, again, hire me for some very specific problems, usually strategic, we don't spend a lot of time there because we're usually fixing problems right now. I'm usually there to solve issues. So it's not a topic on today's plate, but it does come up, and it has come up. And when it does, it's usually from, as I say, an executive coming back from a retreat or something like that, or a new hire executive or senior manager from a competitor or another industry who has experience that we don't have.
Yeah.
And so that's what I have found is how these new IT initiatives really become integrated in a company is really by the influx of new talent. New talent will come in with some experience that we don't have as a team, as an executive team, and they will share that experience and share their success with it, and then that will kind of lead to some more IT projects.
Well, if you accept at face value some of the forecasts, certainly that I'm reading, the IT world is going to be impacted. How quickly remains to be seen. But when you start, something like chatbot, right? You can automate the writing of a document, so you can get your head around that. But so how about code? There's a lot of automation tools today that expedite that. But will you at some point just say in plain English, make me a program that does that, right? Bake me a cake. Yeah. And the program will just happen out of AI. I think that day is coming, and that's not to say you're ever going to get the human off the hook, right? Because the computer did it doesn't mean it's right or it's well applied. Yeah. But I'm going to quote the Snowflake CEO, who I love to quote. He's very, very visible in the industry, Frank Slootman, and he has a lot to say about data things generally. But he says, you know what? You don't have an AI strategy until you have a data strategy. Right. So you have to, it's a little bit like the pyramid thing you're talking about, Jeff, right? You gotta get your act together relative to your data strategy, because I think about AI as just the natural extension of automation. If you've got a model that you and a tool and some people have put together based on some limited number of inputs or some limited number of variables, and it's starting to make sense for the business, you're demonstrating that it has impact, and then you say, okay, well, let's turn machine learning loose with this thing, right? Let's take that model and put it on steroids. To me, there's a logical progression, as opposed to, hey, is there some AI thing I can buy that just kind of does it for me? Yeah. That's harder to imagine for me.
Yeah, and Mark, I've kind of seen this before. I've been around IT since it's been IT, and so
since there was an I in a T.
just not much different than data warehousing, for example. That was a huge deal coming out, and what the reality is, not everyone could afford to invest in it. Not everyone needed the investment, and not everyone ever understood it. A very, very small percentage of companies really leverage data warehousing.
Yeah.
Therefore, business intelligence, as we know today. So there's a chance AI, yes, going to have the impact you described, as we've been hearing about and reading about, but it's not going to be a tidal wave that every company and every business will be involved in day one. It'll be over years and years, and it becomes simpler and simpler. So that maybe more mainstream companies can take advantage of it.
Well, right.
It'll be more of a separator. It'll become a separator like data warehousing was. It'll separate those who can invest in it from those who can't, and that will create a bigger wedge between those who haves and have-nots.
Yeah. There's that old expression, your mileage may vary, right? So just because the hype machine says that we all need to be on the AI train, I think we all need to be conscious of what's possible. Yeah. But then, how does it apply to the average company, very differently than how it's going to apply to Google or Apple or some ginormous firm like that. So, I also have I don't know. It's just an observation. I think there's a lot of companies that feel like when they read all that stuff, or they're talking to their neighbor, or they go to the convention and they hear a speech, there's this reflection that they go, "How are we being left behind? What are we doing? Yeah. We spend money on data stuff. How come we're not more advanced?" Yeah. And I think it's a shame, because it is largely a hype driven thing. And again, not to dismiss it, there's certainly lots of application for it. And as years go by, there'll be more and more of it. But I think for the average company, if you can get your data act together, and certainly your foundational elements when you're talking about the IT pyramid, that's where you want to be. And I guess just to conclude, right, I think people understand hiring guys like you fractional CIOs to plug the holes when they don't have a proper CIO, or perhaps there's a change in in guard. Somebody left, they quit or were fired or whatever. To bring somebody like you in is well understood and wildly valuable, particularly since you take up this business acumen as a differentiator. Kudos to you. But I think the fractional CAO thing that I'm floating is a little less understood. It's a little more esoteric, but it's the same thing, right? Bring in a specialized skill, bring in leadership that can not only help get the foundation of data pulled together, working with people like you in IT, but the implication, utilizing the data to have material effect on a business. I think that's where the action is.
And I think a more relevant current topic that might help support your model as you described it just now is we do the same thing with security. We do the same thing with cybersecurity. We outsource that. We don't have IT experts on staff typically for a business, and then all of a sudden they're a security expert. You want to take no risks there. It's talk about being risk averse. You don't want to have your network administrator who's been in for 10, 15 years all of a sudden turn over cybersecurity to that individual and hope it goes well. Yeah. You don't want to take that risk. And so I think to your point, to sell your CAO model, there's probably some more education that's required in terms of the importance of data, and you can use it towards the AI future as well. Before somebody would say, yeah, let's really invest in this level you're referring to. And again, those who have the basics already in place, have a strong IT foundation, they understand the importance of data. And I think you have a great opportunity for that model. Yeah,
very good. Well, let's leave it there. I really appreciate your time and your insights, Jeff. And for all of you watching, thank you. I look forward to seeing you again on another episode of the Fractional CAO. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mark.